All right, good evening. The time being 7 p.m., all members of the planning board being present, I call this meeting to order. As I look at my green light, I'll just remind everybody, just put your mics, make sure your green's on. Looks good. All right, very good. So we'll start with agenda item A, approval of minutes from March 9th, 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of March 9th, 2026.
A motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item B, B1, committee reports. Do we have any committee reports any of the members wish to make? I know Mr. Champ is going to make a longer one for NEMCOG, but is there anyone that has anything for anything else before that?
Mr. Chairman.
All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like me to project?
Would you please? All right, so I'm just going to summarize the email that prefaced the content of the presentation tonight. So from NEMCOG, we got the following email on September 17, 2025. The NEMCOG Council voted to endorse Part 1 of At Home in Greater Lowell, a regional housing strategy, and to advance the work into Part 2, implementation. So this milestone reflects 2 years of regional engagement, including surveys and interactions, presentations to select boards, et cetera. So Part 1 outlines a series of strategies such as missing middle zoning, transit-oriented development plans, a modular housing study, first-time home buyer program expansion, and a few other things that we're probably pretty familiar with. We've seen them in a lot of different areas where we've seen a need and a lack of supply, et cetera. So basically, so from NEMCOG, and now we have up here, we have the At Home in Greater Lowell. There was a link that everybody was sent, which went to a about 106-page presentation. Excuse me, for some reason my computer is asking me to log into Microsoft in order to see a PDF, which is strange. I do not want to do that. Okay, I think my computer is behaving now. So basically, I think we're all pretty aware that we don't have as much housing as we'd like, that prices in Massachusetts are really high. Prices in the Lowell region are also high, not as high as some others. And basically, NEMCOG and At Home in Greater Lowell have put together some ideas on some possible steps to take to try to improve the situation. Not a lot of this ties in with the MBTA communities, which is obviously something the state is trying to take on a broader level across the state. So what I wanted to do is just bring across some key findings here from their initial report. First and foremost, households are aging and shrinking in size, which means even as the population holds steady, demand is rising for different types of housing, especially smaller and more accessible units. So this is something I think that, and this is going to be kind of a theme for me tonight, that I think we've recognized this in Tewksbury and in zoning the ADU, well, not zoning for ADU, but passing the ADU bylaw, allowing ADUs by right, and allowing for affordable units to be converted from unused commercial spaces. I think this is one particular area that we've already begun to address. And I think we'll see some of that, you know, Tewksbury is working on some of this already. And so we've got things in place and things in the works. One of the next things is housing production has not kept pace with demand, resulting in extremely low vacancy rates. This is directly correlated with rising housing costs for both renters and owners. So I'm not sure what they mean by rising housing cost for renters and owners, because the cost of housing, and to me, it sounds like they're talking about the cost of building housing, which has very little to do with the renters or the owners. That has to do with the developers and the landlords. But if what they're saying is that there's a rising housing cost for people who rent and for people who own, then that I could also understand. But here's the thing, housing production, to be quite frank, and this is just my opinion, housing production can't keep pace with demand. That's just not possible. The flow of people in and out of Massachusetts, what brings them in and the reasons why they leave, the amount of area that we have, the amount of time it takes to pull permits and things like that. The human population can move and change much more quickly than housing can ever adapt. And just as an example, there was an excerpt from the Greater Boston Housing Report Card. Somerville has added homes faster than most other communities. According to the 2025 report card, the city added 2,046 units from 2020 to 2025, a 5.6% increase, outpacing the region's 3.8% growth. So Somerville actually built more houses to outpace their own growth, but prices soared during the same period, and the median family single home jumped from $780,000 in 2015 to $1.3 million in 2025, a 67% increase. Condo prices rose from $703,000 to $900,000, an increase of 28%. So I think that just highlights that Somerville is doing this better than anybody. And in their model, housing production can never keep up with the supply of people. So building more housing, there's just no way unless we come up with something that's super fast, super modular. I know they're doing things in China where they're basically prefabbing entire buildings out of concrete with thousands of units in it. But I don't think that necessarily works here in New England. I think there's just too many constraints. Our permitting processes require a certain amount of time. I will speak on this a little bit later, but I will say Tewksbury is doing better than most other towns when it comes to how many permits we're putting through per 1,000 citizens or 1,000 residents. But just moving forward a little bit, so housing production has not kept pace with demand. That's understood, we get it, but I think we have to accept a baseline principle that I don't think it's possible to ever build housing fast enough to keep up with the changing demands of the population. Housing cost burden is widespread, and the housing squeeze is harming our local economy. I think we all understand that. Municipal fiscal health is impacted more by population aging than housing growth. Housing tenure and affordability vary significantly by race and ethnicity. And then here's some thoughts. Strategic development can help improve transportation access and preserve conservation areas. Construction costs and financial feasibility play a critical role. And their summary here is to restore balance to the housing market. The region, which is the NEMCOG region, the 10 cities and towns, need to build between 9,800 and 17,800 new units over the next 10 years across a range of income levels and housing types. This will increase the vacancy rate, slow housing cost increases, and provide more options for young people and elders. So that's something where I kind of take issue with, because a lot of housing has been built and yet the vacancy rate continues to dwindle. So I think it just brings me back to the first point that I was making, which is I don't think production is necessarily the silver bullet that cures this problem. And that's not the strategy that we should necessarily put all our eggs into that basket. I think we should look at a lot of other possible things. So going forward, they have a few other things in here as far as housing production. They're suggesting that if we increase the total number and type of safe, healthy, and environmentally friendly homes so that people at any stage of life and income will be able to find a place to live. So the number of safe, healthy, and environmentally friendly homes, that all sounds great. I'm not exactly sure, how you build what makes a safe house, as far as if it has more to do with being in safe neighborhoods and whatnot, then I would say, Tewksbury's already doing that. We're building everything we can, and we're providing healthy and environmentally friendly environment for our residents. So if there's other places that can build more housing, but those places appear less safe, whether it's inner cities or certain towns and cities and suburbs, places like West Boylston, I think, have a really high crime rate. That's going to lower property values there and increase property values in places where people want to go. So if you increase the total number of safe, healthy, and environmentally friendly homes, I think everybody is just building whatever housing they can right now. So I don't think that's a particular type of housing that has so much to do with the developer or the planner, so much as where it's being built and the type of city or town it's being built in. This was one that, housing location, increase the number of homes in places that are climate resilient with access to public transportation, employment, basic services, and amenities essential for daily life. Climate resiliency, this is Massachusetts. We have 4 to 5 months of harsh winter that interferes with our ability to access public transportation. It impedes bike lanes. We have sidewalks that don't get cleared for, if it was Fall River, I think they were without streets and sidewalks for 2 weeks. So, it's a beautiful idea. I love it. Tell the people in Georgia or Oklahoma, hey, let's build more homes in places that are climate resilient. But this is Massachusetts. We need strategies that work for Massachusetts and more specifically for Tewksbury. And unfortunately, our public transportation system, just the way Massachusetts has grown up, our public transportation system is very city-centric, and we have the commuter rail, but it doesn't hit nearly enough places. And unfortunately, they keep raising rates and then offering more vouchers for people that can't afford the new rates. And then the rates basically make them less competitive so that people in the suburbs who could afford it would rather just have the convenience of driving their car. So the MBTA is pricing itself out of the market. I think that there's two things at play there that are working at cross purposes. Provide housing stability for current and future residents by creating and maintaining homes. Develop a region-wide housing services office to inventory, evaluate, and communicate actual affordable housing inventory and anti-displacement programs. To me, to be fair, I think that's a terrible idea. Adding another layer of bureaucracy and more red tape that's impeding what we do here in Tewksbury and preventing us from servicing our own residents with our housing. I don't think adding another council or advisory council with salaries and whatnot to manage things, I don't think that's the issue. I'll put my faith in our community development planner all day, every day, and the services of this board. I don't think another statewide or region-wide office is the answer. I think NEMCOG does a fine job with what they're doing, and I would rather see them get more funding to tackle this problem than see something statewide. This one, I think, we can feel free to talk about this, but work with state and federal partners to create low or no interest mortgages and expand first-time home buying programs, including rent-to-own programs. So we had very low interest mortgages from 2008 to 2017 or 18, I think it was, till inflation skyrocketed post-COVID. And as great as it was in terms of people could get low interest mortgages, and yet the cost of housing from 2015 to 2025 has gone up 70%. So again, not a silver bullet. I also would like to point out when I see this particular thing that when I see work with state and federal partners to create low or no interest mortgages, to me, that means they want to take the student loan programs that they've implemented for college and translate them into 30 and 50-year mortgages and just create a population, or not create, but I think the program would get misused and would lead to a population thinking that they're affording something when in actuality, they're just putting themselves more in more of a lifetime of debt. And I think it's just going to raise the cost of housing because it's going to make it appear more affordable, but the market will always move to what people can afford. So I think by offering those types of programs, my greatest fear would be that it would raise the cost of tuition, or it would raise the cost of houses similarly to the way tuition prices have gone up tenfold in the past 25, 30 years. One thing that they have in here that I have been telling everybody that I think would be a great program, create and expand programs to provide housing counseling, financial literacy education, and housing readiness for residents and those seeking to live in the region. I've been touting that that's a high school course that every single person in America should have to take before they graduate. I'm not sure why that's never been implemented. Believe it or not, California, of all places, is putting that into their curriculum soon, or they've just proposed putting it into their curriculum by 2031. And I say good for them. I don't typically have a lot to say about the government of California, but I feel that is something that everybody should understand how loans work, mortgages work, checking accounts work, savings accounts work, credit cards work, you know, car loans, all of that. Financial literacy, I think, would be a huge benefit to everybody, and I think that would put them on a path to affordability. It would teach people to live within their means, to control their spending, to have more savings, et cetera. So that is something that I would absolutely love to see in the state curriculum. So moving on from there, right, the selected strategies as far as, those are basically the problems. Those were some of their ideas on where we could try to make some improvements. But ultimately, those being my thoughts, ultimately, you know, the NEMCOG is looking for us to offer some advice to them or some feedback to them as far as what can we as a board on behalf of the town of Tewksbury get behind. So in that sense, I would like to say, I think it would be better if we looked at housing affordability in a much larger picture and not blame the house itself or the apartment itself for all of the ills. I think we have to look at things like the cost of the land, the cost to build, how much people pay in property taxes, not necessarily in Tewksbury, which is relatively middle of the road compared to a lot of other cities and towns. Cost of utilities, you know, we see that in the news a lot right now, that Massachusetts has very high utility costs compared to the rest of the region. Transportation costs, and then of course we have sales tax, income tax, just in general interest rates, and in general inflation. There's a lot of headwinds working against us that are way beyond the control of this board. And with some help in those areas, I think some other initiatives that we decide to take on could get some real traction, and we could see some genuine improvements in this. So that being said, I guess I'll open it up to the rest of the board as far as what sorts of ideas you feel like of the strategies they offer, we think we could throw our weight behind.
Mr. Duffy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, great presentation there, Jonathan. You know, all important stuff. You know, there's just so many pieces to this puzzle that it's, you know, it's difficult for any one board or any one, you know, person or group of people to kind of, to get that aha moment where you got it all figured out, because it's just very, very difficult. You know, and for context, you know, when I first got out of high school, I was working for a GC building a subdivision in Townsend, Mass. Those houses at the time were selling for $29,900. Now, I never went back, but I can guarantee you that those houses are worth, let's just say, $300,000. That means they've increased in value over 10 times. Well, my classmate who I worked with there for his dad went on to build a lot more houses over the years, and And his famous saying is, I think we killed the golden goose, because there has to be a cap. There has to be a point that we're going to reach where housing is just going to be totally unaffordable. And here we are today, I believe. Because if somebody buys a house today in Tewksbury for $800,000, it's not going to be worth $8 million in 30 years. It's not going to increase the way that the housing costs have increased over the last 30, 40 years. So, I think that, I think the note I made on that was that the land cost itself makes building affordable housing. And when I say affordable, entry-level housing, let's say.
Sure.
Not so much affordable, because there is a difference, and I don't want to confuse anybody. It makes it not very attractive, for average builder. For new construction, that is. Now, if it's a public-private, venture with condos in an existing mill building or something along those lines, you know what I mean? A retrofit where you can save some money on construction costs, let's say. Although retrofitting can be even more expensive sometimes, as you know, to bring things up to code and so on and so forth,
Sure.
than new construction is. And you have to worry about some of the old, abatement issues, older construction types that are built with asbestos and lead pipes and so on and so forth, So there's a lot of little things there that, and I'm just throwing these things out there. These things, I'm not trying to counter anything, sort of like filling in the gaps a little bit of what it would take to actually have an inventory of entry-level housing for our kids and grandkids that are, say, graduating from high school or college now. Now, a lot of them are gonna, there is gonna be when all the baby boomers are gone, there is gonna be a little inventory of housing, Now, I don't know what that's gonna add up to, or if anybody looks at that number, but, I think probably in the generation past, people have, at retirement age, many people would sell their house and move to Florida or whatever, move into a condo, move into a less expensive home, move into a home that's more, handicap friendly if they have issues. But I think more and more people are actually staying in their houses now. So that's sort of a little bit of a bottleneck in that entry-level housing as well, is the group of us, baby boomers, that are choosing to stay in our homes. So that's just a thought. And, I know Somerville, I know one of my last jobs before I retired, I was renovating the Bank of America in Davis Square. Now, and that Davis Square has come a long way over the years, as has most of Somerville. An apartment in Davis Square is probably $5,000 a month and up. So yes, that housing might be available, but it takes 4 Tufts University students to be able to afford that apartment. So I think affordable rentals almost has to be a piece of that puzzle as well. Now, how can you make somebody charge less money for a rental? Don't know the answer to that. If you own a property and you want to rent it out, most of us would want to get whatever you can for it, whatever the market will be at. So where does that piece come from, that extra, those extra dollars that are going to subsidize either for the building owner, or for the prospective tenant? So there's a little bit of a money gap there as well, And then, whenever we talk about building, many people don't want anything built anywhere. I think we're all aware of that. And as far as the climate resiliency, you know, that's, many of you know that I'm a lead AP as well as a licensed builder here in Massachusetts. So, you know, I think about a flood that was in Memphis 4 or 5 years ago. I'm just taking a guess at the years. Wiped out their sewage treatment plant, irreparable. They weren't able to fix it. It took months and years to get that thing, to get everything back online. If municipalities don't believe it, if they don't believe that things can happen like that with a rainstorm or a flood or a hurricane or a tornado or whatever, then they're very likely going to be less prepared when and if it does happen. So I think that has to be at least a piece of the puzzle. You know, that things, whether it's weather or fires or whatever, you know, can disrupt a municipality. So, you know, certainly I would want to live in a part of the country, I think we already are here in New England for the most part, that kind of signs on to climate resiliency, even though in many circles it's kind of a bad word, you know. But if we could talk about it as in terms of sewage treatment plants and you know, that type of thing, we might get a better understanding of it. So that's pretty much all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Fratelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nice job, Jonathan, presentation from NEMCOG. You know, I think Tewksbury's done a pretty good job over the years, 10 or 15 years that I've been involved around here with the planning board and so forth. There's not much land here to develop in town any longer. We've done the majority of that. We've reached our 10% on the affordable housing numbers. And, you know, I look at towns like Dracut, where there's a lot of farmland out there. They have more opportunities to build and help the situation out. But, you know, maybe ADUs is the answer to adding on to people's land and making, but they're all small numbers. And I'm not going to get big numbers out of any of those things. But, you know, I mean, I just don't see any place in Tewksbury that we see any significant housing additions to our community, you know. So as far as the MBTA thing is gone, the residents of Tewksbury spoke, they didn't want any part of it. So, you know, that's neither said to move on or not, who knows. But, man, I don't see much happening in Tewksbury. We've done a pretty good job in town, I think, as far as, you know, getting our housing up. So with that said, I mean, they have a big project to go ahead if they want to go with any farther, NEMCOG, as far as helping this situation out. So, but I don't think it's in Tewksbury. But all set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Fuchsia?
I kind of agree with Mr. Fratelli on we don't have a lot of space and a lot of area to put anything like a big development anywhere. The land's pricey, you know, like you said before, like we're all staying in our houses now. We can't afford anything else. So I don't have anything else.
All right, so I guess it's me. So I guess part of what I'd say is this isn't, it's not new. We've had these conversations when we've done some of the other stuff we've done, including like the zoning. Now, this top one right on here, missing middle zoning. I know at least myself, I've said it, I don't know, more times than I can possibly imagine, about the fact that we don't have small lot zoning in Tewksbury. That's one of the reasons why we have this problem too, because we force developers, when there isn't some way around it, to build homes on an acre of land, which again, to put in your mind, is a football field. That's how big an acre is. How many people, I can tell you right now, I know it because I looked it up. 60% of the people in this town do not live on an acre in their single-family homes, which means 3 out of the 5 of us wouldn't live on an acre of land, the home we actually have here in Tewksbury. But yet, new development is forced to have an acre of land and 150 feet of frontage. That's done for one reason, to prevent building. So when you build those homes, how much do you have to sell them for? $800,000 in order to make your money back. And you can only build a few of them. So you aren't providing the kind of housing that's going to be a starter home. Who's buying a starter home at $800,000? So they're not adding to that. You've got people, they've already said in here, you're living in your home, you're staying in your homes. You're staying in your home because there isn't an option in the middle to go to, because we don't provide new, smaller lot, smaller size homes enough to allow an older person to get out of the bigger home they're in so that someone else who maybe has a bigger family at that point could buy that home. So they could move down a level into a smaller area, a smaller lot, smaller house, whatever. But they're also then running into the new people who can only afford to buy a condo. So the condos aren't available because that person couldn't find that housing in the middle either, because we don't provide the middle. So that's part of the problem, is our own rules get in the way. You know, I mean, saying that housing, it can't keep up, of course it can't keep up, but we also have to recognize population grows. It's not diminishing. We're not getting less people. They might be going to different places, but the population is going to continue to grow, which means the demand grows. You mentioned Somerville. Now, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but I'm willing to bet that one of the reasons why they had to go so hard recently is because for a really long time, they weren't doing it. It's like the way we deal with the schools. Ignore it, ignore it, ignore it, and then all of a sudden somebody wonders why it costs $250 million to build a new school and why we need 7 of them. Because you didn't do anything for a long time, and then all of a sudden, you have a problem. And now it's a problem that everybody has, because, and that's when, like, when you say, like, you know, yes, you gotta have your own, you know, things that you look at. But you do need the bigger, you know, the bigger people at the table to do some of this, because there's nothing anybody in Tewksbury is gonna do about coming up with any kind of programs, like real programs, that are gonna allow people to find ways to come up with the money they need to buy into most of these things. You know, those kind of, you know, they have to come from something bigger than a local town, because you're never going to be able to do it. Nobody here has the control over that kind of finances to do that kind of thing. But you do have control over things like the zoning that you deal with. So if you aren't working in conjunction with all those other entities, and everybody's trying to do this stuff on their own, then yeah, you're going to have a really hard time coming up with a sensible program that everybody can work with, because you're doing 500 different kinds of rules. Everybody's got their own thing. They're like, not here, don't do this kind, do that. But that doesn't work with the program they just created at the state level. Crap. And now that one doesn't work with the one they created at the federal level. So it's like, you know, there has to be some bend, or you're just going to have, it's again, you're going to keep kicking it down, and at some point, and I think that's, you know, to Mr. Duffy's point, when it hits that wall where you just cannot do it anymore, what happens then? You know what I mean? Because the other thing too is, there's bigger picture items when you think about it. You drive people out of Massachusetts. We do a census every 10 years. That determines how many representatives we get in Congress, which determines how much money we get from the federal government. You keep driving people out, we get less representation. It's been going on most censuses as we've done them. We skip every couple, maybe we get safe and we were able to keep people, but you know, I think it's something like 15. Used to have like 15 reps. We don't have 15 reps anymore, and it's not going up when they do the census the next time. You're either staying the same or you're going down, which is one less body in the, you know, in the federal government to ask for what we need. So, you know, when we say, oh, go somewhere else, well, it starts with drive them to the next town over. Then it's the next state over. Then it's move them to the Midwest. Like, so, you know, there are consequences for those things too. When you drive people out of here and they go somewhere else, all of a sudden those somewhere else's have a lot more pull on things that we used to have more pull on. So it's, you know, that becomes problematic. You know, you don't want to become Rhode Island at some point and you have 1 rep and 2 senators. That's going to be problematic. You know what I mean? So, you know, to me, I think, you know, we banged our heads against a lot of this locally. You bang your heads against it statewide, and it's a national problem. But you know, Massachusetts is a place people want to be. So we notice it more because we have people who, you know, work here, develop here, you know, whether it's industry or the schools. I mean, we have some of the biggest colleges in the world, you know, so people do come here, so we notice it. But if we continue to kick it down, you know, down the road without buying into some of these suggestions that are being put out, then I think we're going to get, the problem's going to get worse, not better. And our kids and our kids' kids are the ones who are going to find themselves just looking around going, I don't know what to do. I don't know, you know, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And that's going to be a tough thing to do, you know, if everybody's facing the same thing, because nobody dealt with it. So, but it's hard. You know, I mean, you just dealt with one region, 10 towns, and it's hard. Because every one of those 10 towns has a little bit of a different view, a little different situation. But now build that out to 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. That's just us. We're not that big, and it just gets exponentially worse and harder as you get to the more populous places, So, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think some of these things have to be embraced, even if they don't feel good and they hurt a little bit, because I think the pain for not dealing with them and just turning blind eyes to them is going to be so much worse for, our families and their families after that. So, but it was a good presentation, thank you.
Well, I would like to say that I know that we did the zoning, few follow-up thoughts. I know we've redone the zoning in town, and we were going for half-acre lots, is that right? And then it didn't make it into the final.
I missed one meeting.
Understood. And I'm not trying to do a sore spot, I'm just saying, half-acre zoning would be very consistent with the historical character of Tewksbury, most of the homes that we have here. I think if you couple that with, modular house building, the types of things that they're doing now, I mean, there's a lot of, and again, this is about investment. So the I think a modular strategy could be really effective. You can build much quicker. You can use smaller lots. The materials are more climate resilient. And I think that would allow us to kind of break through a lot of the log jams that are impeding what we're doing. But no one's going to build a prefab or a modular house on a 1-acre lot, plain and simple. So for us, I guess, in terms of recommendations, I don't know how often the town appoints a committee to look at all the zoning and come up with ideas on how to change zoning, or if I don't know if that's the master overlay or what it is. I've only been here for 4 years, so.
When we do the big one, that's done, I don't know how often we actually do the big one, but I don't know, it was between the last two. How long was it between them?
So there isn't a prescribed.
Right, I know. But how long
yeah.
was it?
Between the master plan or between zoning?
The zoning bylaw.
Oh, geez, 2002 to 2016?
Okay, so that's not long, we
14
went with the big one. But you can propose a zoning change anytime you want, and you could propose smaller lot zoning. Watch what happens. Because I tried to get into the big one.
Pitchforks thing again?
I tried to get into the big one because the whole thing was being passed as one big thing. Bring that up as a single issue, and watch the 150 people at town meeting lose their minds. I mean, that's the problem, is that if you try to bring that forward, and you say a half-acre, you'd be stunned at how many people in Tewksbury live on a quarter-acre in single-family homes.
Oh, I'm aware.
But this is what I mean. But despite the fact that almost all those people standing in front of you live on that size lot, they will still tell you we should have an acre-sized lot and 150 feet of frontage requirement. Why? I mean, if you've seen someone who has an acre-sized lot, look at the size of the yard they have to maintain.
Right.
I mean, I'd ask them, most of them, if they really want to go out and mow that thing, and they sit down mower every Saturday, but that's the size that they were required to have for that house, because it was built under the rules that we have. We don't have a middle ground. Go down to Super South Tewksbury. Find me an acre of lot house in Super South Tewksbury. At least that's what I refer to it as. You go down towards the lake. Find it. Almost every house in that place could reach out and borrow a cup of sugar from the house next door.
Right.
But if you tried to build something new down there, like came up when they got rid of, what was it, the VFW?
VFW,
The
yeah.
VFW, and somebody tried to make the change to make it fit the rest of the area, and people went ballistic. They wanted manor-sized homes built in the middle of Super South Tewksbury. It looks nothing like anything else there, because they didn't want anything built there. It had nothing to do with what made sense. It had to do with, we want nothing. That's a problem. And if we can't fix that mentality, none of these ideas make any sense, because you can't get them passed to implement them, because that's a bigger problem. It's a mentality issue when you have those kind of discussions, because, a different size, smaller lot zoning, other communities have done it. You mentioned California. That's something they've been very good at doing, is having that. So, but we have a hard time with that kind of thing. And when you propose it, even if you try to explain why it makes sense, why many of the people standing there in front of you live on lots just like you're describing, That's not what you get as a response, though. That is problematic from a proposal standpoint. It's dead on arrival when you put that kind of stuff out there. But if you try to explain to somebody, but there aren't enough smaller type homes for people to either downsize into or move into first before buying the $800,000 home, somewhere hopefully down the road as their careers, that kind of thing.
Sure.
You can't connect them. It's really hard to get those connections for folks to put them together because, you live your own life. You live where you live now, and you're comfortable with that. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But it's like, what happens to you in 10, 15 years when you're thinking, geez, this house is huge. What am I doing here? My kids moved out. I had this enormous house and the Ponderosa to mow every Saturday. I'm like, whoa. But if I look at trying to buy what's a little smaller, it's like I could sell my house and I'm really not going to get much difference for what I'm now going to have to go buy. That doesn't make sense to me. It's why they stay where they are. That's hard. That middle ground has not been increased. It's diminished, if anything else. It's really difficult to provide those things for people going in either direction. And now those people are all hitting each other on the way up or down in like the condos or those kind of things. And even say condos and see what happens. Even if it's not really what you mean, but you say condos and that's it. You might as well have just said a swear word. But what are people supposed to do if you don't need that much space anymore and you want some of the amenities that are provided in certain types of condos, whether it's a pool or whatever, certain things. But say it to somebody or say we want to allow condos or something like that. And a lot of places are going to freak out just at the word, but you're going to have to put people someplace at some point. And that's when you run into things like we just had when people go ballistic when the state does something. Because at some point, when you're not dealing with it at one level, a level up is probably going to do something, or a level up from that is going to do something. Now it becomes a dictate to you, and you don't like it. But someone has to deal with it, and if you can't deal with it here starts to deal with it. And then now you're butting heads with that. That's why when you said like all these programs, that's what I'm saying when I'm saying if you can't work in all those levels together, then yeah, you're going to keep butting heads. And that's problematic too, because you can't get anywhere like that. It's just, where it's us against them stuff then, and that's problematic. So, but, all right, anybody else? We good?
No, good.
All right. Thank you, John. That was awesome.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Well, I think I actually have to ask, of the selected strategies, are there any here that we feel we could offer some support and contribute some ideas to as this rolls forward, which is me as the representative of Tewksbury at NEMCOG. Again, we've talked about the missing middle zoning and the challenges of trying to do that. Transit-oriented development plans, I think, the MBTA communities is that, and it's not receiving a whole lot of support in town right now, but, I think the modular housing study, I think if we could do something like that, try to decrease the cost, and maybe, again, like in something like that, I would say maybe couple that with some sort of state or federal incentive program to try to get something behind it. I'm willing to bet a lot less people would have done solar if there hadn't been that incentivization. So I think modular housing, quite frankly, part of the housing cost is simply the cost of building the house. A big chunk of that is the land, which, like in Tewksbury, I would love to go down to, yes, and it's an election year, but I would love to go down to half-acre zoning if we want to. So
Jonathan said at that time, not me.
so there you go. So I just gave some write-in candidate about 200 votes.
Yeah.
Okay, but
John, what would an expanded first-time homebuyer program look like, do you think?
one of the things that was suggested in the packet was a rent-to-own program. So I think of that, so one of my foundational principles is if it works at home, it probably works most other places. If it doesn't work at home, it probably doesn't work as you expand it, right? So, I don't, I've never thought about charging my kids room and board, but I know people that their kids get out of college, they come home, they charge room and board, but all they're doing is taking that money, putting it in a savings program, right? Or just an account. And then when they're ready to move out, or if the parents want to move out and the children want to buy the house, or one of the children want to buy the house, well, here's the money you paid into rent all those years, but guess what? I didn't actually put it towards the rent. I just set it aside for you to teach you the concept of rent, and now you have a nice little nest egg to buy your own place. So I think something like that, and quite frankly, so here's what I would do, quite frankly. This is what I have done. If I was the federal government or the state of Massachusetts and I wanted to do a first-time home buyer program, I would basically do a tax-deferred savings program that you can put money into, and the state or the federal agency would match, and that money can only be used towards the down payment on a house. So so basically you've got to be serious that in your future, you're buying a house. You can't use it for anything else. If you withdraw it, you lose the match and you pay the taxes. But now you've got someone saying, so now you're not just giving somebody something for free. What you're saying is, I want to reward you for a good behavior, and I'm willing to go in with you and carry half the weight and match the effort that you're putting into, becoming a responsible home buyer.
See, I like that. Like, I like Jonathan's idea, but that's where you run into the other problem, which is, how are you guaranteeing that there'll be housing available for all those folks who set aside that money if we don't make it easier for that kind of housing? So like just the one you just did, to me, it's like middle zoning, modular housing, expanded first-time home buyers. They can't actually be separate things. You would want those things to be connected. Perhaps the zone being created is connected to the incentives, meaning the zones are created and then there's an incentive for the modular homes to be built in there. There's a piece there. Then the incentive is that the home buying program is that, somehow it's connected to that zone and that modular creation of homes as a way for all three to connect and make it so that you're getting all those levels connected up to make them incentive in each of those areas. Incentive for the person to set aside the money, like in your program, but incentive for the town to create the zone. And then an incentive for the builder to build that type of home rather than something else. The big $800,000, house versus the modular. Because, they want to make a buck. You want the people to save a buck to be able to buy the home. Sure. But there's that other piece, like, well, at the end of the day, like, the one you described is basically like the college fund, like was it 504?
529.
529. When you set that aside.
But yeah, 529.
But at the end of the day, nobody's really worried that there won't be a college at the end of the rainbow that someone can go to. Might not be the one you want to go to, but you're not probably going to run out of schools. There's going to be some place for that money to be spent. At the way we're going right now, I mean, do you feel like you could make the same promise to somebody who sets aside, that money for 10, 20, starting when they're young, like, or a parent starting that for them, and then they start picking up on like the 529? Can you make that promise to them with the way things are right now, that there will be enough houses for all those people who start that 528 program? Those have to
I can't
connect.
promise them that it will be here. There will definitely be the houses, it just won't necessarily be in Massachusetts.
But there's the thing, but the 529s, for example, then you do need to find those other levels to meet up with, because the 529s tell you right off the bat, if it's another state,
Sure.
you should check with your state. And so that's what I mean when I say they can't be disconnected, because if you're going to say, but you can take that money and go to Oklahoma, can you? Who created it? Did Mass create it? Who created it, and how can you be sure you can take that and use it in Oklahoma, if that's where you got to go?
Right.
So that's what I mean when you say, like, you can't be us, them, those guys. You know what I mean? Like, that's why these things, they're all dotted out here, but I think it's a really hard thing to not put connections to all these, or you're never going to get there, because your idea is good, but by itself, it could run into a brick wall.
No.
You know what I mean? And there's your problem.
So the overall idea would be, I think we could build a regional storytelling program showing how if we put 3 or 4 or 5 of these things together into a comprehensive strategy that we can gradually implement, then I think it just, in that case, that narrative, it just takes time to gain traction. Some towns might gain traction faster than others. I will point out that regional infrastructure growth is a huge problem in the sense that to make any meaningful change, and again, this was part of this week's NEMCOG meeting, well, a week ago's NEMCOG meeting is, they have a dashboard of 6 or 7 infrastructure projects. Chelmsford has been in line to turn 2 signalized intersections into rotaries, roundabouts. It's been in design and development for so long that the cost has gone from 7 million to 20 million, and now nobody has enough funds for them to actually do it. So again, cost of construction in Massachusetts is just hyper expensive.
Not to mention the only people
And
left in the world that know
time-consuming.
how to drive on rotaries live in this state.
Indeed. And so, the infrastructure is a huge issue. I think it's a big issue for us here in Tewksbury, because Route 38 it has a hard time handling the capacity at peak hours. It would be great if we could get some relief when it came to infrastructure. I think if the state of Massachusetts offered some infrastructure relief and tied it into a housing plan, that would get a lot more traction and a lot more support. And then I also feel like, as far as if we could take I think the state could also do something very simple, like make building middle zoning housing tax-free. You want to incentivize developers, all they need is a nudge. They're looking at a 6, 7, 8% construction loan. You tell them they can buy all the materials tax-free. I bet they would take that bet 9 times out of 10. So I think there's a lot of things that we could put into the mix, come up with a strategy, incentivize it at different levels. It's not all about freebies and gimmies and whatnot. Without a doubt, the state has money to spend. It certainly seems willing to spend it on pretty much anything. So I would much rather see us come up with a way to put that money towards good use and solve what obviously is a problem that the state feels needs some drastic measures to be addressed. So I guess, that being said, I think I have one more meeting with this board before I would present anything to NEMCOG. So I guess what I'll try to do is maybe put together a multi-point plan with some ideas. And again, I would welcome any input or revisions or whatever, which I'd be happy to pull an all-nighter and make before it went to MCOG. Because our next meeting, I think, is only 2 nights away from the meeting where I have to present our thoughts and ideas. But again, I think generally I have a pretty good consensus as far as what our thoughts are here. And what we'd like to see and the issues that we've tried to overcome and have fallen short or met resistance and whatnot. But I think a lot of that, we would have to beat it with a better storytelling program and just tell them that Tewksbury is going to change, and I would rather be in control of that change than be dictated as to what that change is going to be.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could just add, looking for input from the board, Jonathan, we already do a pretty good job as far as when applicants come to build an in-law, you know what I mean? So that helps a little bit with some of the housing issues. I think we have you have some great strategies there. The modular housing sounds very interesting to look into. Probably wouldn't hurt if we were really looking for some real information, would be to have maybe a house builder in here and explain to us some of the whys and why nots. Like if we're looking to make housing construction less expensive, maybe a builder might be, person to talk to, or their accountant or somebody like, you know what I mean? Somebody in that mix. To present some information if they're interested in doing it. It would just be a volunteer thing, I'm thinking. But, so just to educate us on why it costs X amount of dollars a square foot to build a house these days. I mean, I think most of us have a pretty fair idea that, certain materials are very, very expensive and labor is expensive and so on and so forth. But if we could see a breakdown of that or an example of that, it would be helpful for us to kind of like, have a rough idea in our head going forward. what it would take to, if you can go line item by line item and try to figure out a way to reduce the cost of construction, if it's at all possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nice job, Jonathan.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, moving on to agenda item B2, Town Planners Report. Ms. Lauder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the next meeting on April 13th, we only have continued hearings. We don't have any new applications, so we'll just be taking care of some business from prior meetings. Next, a reminder that the Open Space and Recreation Plan Update Public Forum is scheduled for tomorrow evening, Tuesday, March 24th, from 6 to 7:30 PM at the Tewksbury Rec Center, 286 Livingston Street. And we're going to be discussing the draft goals for open space, recreation, and natural areas to gather input for the plan update that will guide us from 2026 to 2036. That's another project we're working on with NIMCOG, and their planning team will be in to share draft goals, talk about how the feedback from prior sessions helped shape these goals, and what we'll be looking at moving forward as the plan moves to the adoption stage. And lastly, just another reminder for folks to return their census to the town clerk's office with the annual election and town meeting coming up, just to make sure that they remain eligible to vote. Thank you.
All right. So I don't know if, I guess it fits here, but I'll let anybody know who cares that this board and the select board are going to meet in a joint session on Wednesday, first for an executive session and then an open meeting, the topic being the MBTA law. So, we'll see what comes of that on Wednesday. And I think that's it for B. Moves us to agenda item C, 485 Main Street. The applicant has requested that the application be withdrawn without prejudice. Do you have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we accept the request from the applicant to withdraw the application without prejudice at 485 Main Street.
I have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Brings us to agenda item D, 1325 Main Street. The applicant there has also requested a continuance. That would be to our meeting on the 13th, and we have that penciled in for 7. So do we have a motion to continue that until 7 PM on the 13th?
So moved.
We have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. That brings us to agenda item E.
Can I back up just one
Yeah.
second? Ms. Louder, is the abutter letter, has that been forwarded to
Yes.
the developer? Okay.
Yes, it has.
That brings us to agenda item E, 1541 Astle Street. The applicant has requested a continuance to our 427 meeting. We pencil that in for 7:05. Is that what you said? 7:05. Do I have a motion to continue?
So moved.
A motion made. Do I have a second? Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries.
A little late.
That brings us to correspondence. I didn't see any correspondence, did I? No correspondence in the package. That brings us to other business not known at the time of the posting of the agenda. Is there anything that anyone wishes to talk about that we didn't have on the agenda? Seeing none, brings us to a motion for adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. You guys, we'll see you on the 13th of April.